When I was 5 years old, my dad took me to work with him for the first time, and I remember that day like it was yesterday. Walking into the front doors of the building, holding my dad's big hand, walking around and saying hello to people, walking out into the factory and hearing the loud sounds of punch presses and the smell of paint, and seeing all of these shiny red wagons on the conveyor line marching along. And to me, it seemed like some sort of magical Rube Goldberg machine with people and equipment and materials all working together to produce these delightful products and send them out into the world, bringing joy to families. And that's really when I started to fall in love with Radio Flyer. And I loved the fact that we made things, that we created products out of materials like steel and paint and rubber. And as I grew older, I loved how people reacted to Radio Flyer and what it meant in people's lives. Years later, when I was 23 years old, I started my first full-time job at Radio Flyer. And when I walked into my dad's office in 1992, not much had changed since the Eisenhower administration. The same furniture, the same paint, the same drapes. There was even this clock on my dad's desk that was stopped. Everything felt frozen in time. It didn't have that same magical feeling it had when I visited so many years ago when I was a kid. The fact is, the company was in serious trouble. Our sales had been declining, we weren't profitable, and we had a lot of debt. I remember very early in my job, a banker sitting my dad and me down and saying repeatedly, "You have no cash. Do you get it? You guys have no cash." Adding fuel to the fire, soon competitors came out with plastic wagons, and we didn't see this coming. We weren't talking to consumers. We weren't doing research. We were an inwardly focused manufacturer. And these plastic wagons started taking sales away from our best-selling wagon for 30 years. Can you imagine having a bestseller virtually unchanged for 30 years? The Town and Country was our cash cow, and the plastic wagons were killing it. I think my exact words were, "Oh shit, plastic wagons." So we had no new products in the pipeline, our team and culture was dysfunctional, and we were quickly running out of cash and options. And even though I was young and just started, I was terrified of this old family business curse, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, meaning usually by the time the business gets to the 3rd generation, it either goes away or the 3rd generation screws it up. And guess what? I was the 3rd generation. So I realized that I was really young, really green, and didn't know anything about working in a business, let alone leading a business. But I also knew that I had been handed this incredible opportunity of being lucky enough to be the guy that was the grandson of the founder of Radio Flyer. And it really motivated me to try to figure out how can we take all of that magic I experienced when I was 5 years old and change it and translate it and evolve it into something new. And so I felt like if I committed deeply, and I'd read enough stories and read enough history about people who have deep commitment, how they can transform organizations and teams, that I could try to take the company from failing to phenomenal, or as we have come to describe it, FUNomenal, spelled F-U-N, which is kind of a unique blend of excellence and joy. And over the 30 years that I've been working at the company, we've developed principles that have helped us to get on the path of taking the company to phenomenal. And I'd like to share 3 of those principles with you today. Principle number 1, profits follow purpose. I've always loved my grandpa Antonio's story because he has the quintessential American immigrant success story. He was born into a working class family in northern Italy, that's him on the right, and his dad and grandpa were carpenters. And so at a young age, my grandpa tagged along with them and learned all of these essential carpentry skills, but they were really poor. So at the age of 16, Antonio came to America, to Chicago, to find a better life. And he worked on anything he could find, like so many immigrants, on construction crews, washing vegetables, working on the railroad tracks, until he was able to save up enough money to rent a small garage on the west side of Chicago. And that's where he was able to put his carpentry skills to work. And he started making furniture and phonograph cabinets, and eventually a wooden wagon that he used to haul tools around in the workshop. But pretty soon his customers were buying more wagons than anything else. So he focused on the wagon business. And that's where he found his success, building the Liberty Coaster Wagon Company, which was his first name for the company, named after the statue that welcomed him when he came to America. So he started to scale up production, he added workers, and in the late 20s, he transitioned from wood production to steel in order to mass produce his products. This earned him the nickname Little Ford, and it resulted in the creation of this iconic little red Radio Flyer wagon. And everyone always asks me, why is the name Radio Flyer? And it's because my grandpa named the product after the two coolest high-tech innovations of the day, the radio and the airplane. So if he were naming it today, it might be something like Quantum AI Dronester. But don't worry, we're not going to change the name. So it was really clear why we had existed, to make steel and wood wagons. But it wasn't clear that we were going to continue to exist because we were quickly going out of business. It looked like the products that we had made and sold for so many years were doomed to extinction. So I started to ask our customers and families about Radio Flyer and their experience with the products. And I'd ask them, well, where were you when you were playing with your Radio Flyer? Who were you with? How did you feel? And we started to uncover these very, very strong emotions and themes because usually the first thing people do when you say Radio Flyer is smile. And the second thing they do is tell a story. And there are always these wonderful stories about childhood. People say, I was playing outside. I was with my grandma that I loved, or my brother. And we used to imagine that our wagon was a race car, or a spaceship, or a time machine. The sun was in my face. The wind was in my hair. I could smell fresh cut grass. All of these warm memories. And so we started to realize that yes, we make wagons, and if you had walked into the building at Radio Flyer 30 years ago and said to somebody, what do you do here? That's the answer you would have gotten. But actually, we bring smiles and create warm memories. And by digging into our deeper, higher purpose, we were able to unlock this reason for being that was very authentic to the brand, but also much bigger. And it felt invigorating. It really changed the mindset that we had of ourselves. So that's how we uncovered our purpose. But we still needed sales because the company was really in trouble. And that's what resulted in these two other principles I'd like to tell you about, what we call watch them like a hawk and plant a lot of seeds. And here's why. So when I started to talk to people about Radio Flyer and ask them those questions, they would tell me about those Radio Flyer wagon stories that I shared with you, but they'd also talk about something that was pretty surprising. A lot of people would say, I had a Radio Flyer tricycle. And I said, well, tell me about that tricycle. What was it? What did it look like? And they'd say, oh yeah, it was this shiny red tricycle. It had a big chrome bell. It had streamers coming out of the handlebars. It had rubber tires. It was a Radio Flyer. But the crazy thing was, we had never made a tricycle before. So we did something really smart. We made a tricycle. And we made a tricycle that people remembered, those design cues that were so strong in their memory, but they didn't remember the brand. And chances are the brand had gone away, or it wasn't a significant brand, but they associated Radio Flyer with it for obvious reasons. And this became a great seller. And I started to learn from this that we could really grow by creating awesome kids products that inspire active play. So That's what I mean by watch them like a hawk. And by listening to customers, we learned a lot. But we also learned that sometimes people can't tell you what they're going to do or why they do what they do. So traditional forms of market research and focus groups can often lead to a lot of errors because, I don't know if you know this, but people are very irrational creatures. And most of us really don't understand why we do what we do. So if you ask a consumer, would you buy this or would you do this? Chances are you're going to get very inaccurate information. But if you watch what people are doing, you can observe problems you can solve. And that's what resulted in a lot of really great selling products for us. And plant a lot of seeds is about the fact that you have to try a lot of stuff. Something like 9 out of 10 new products fail. I'm sure people have heard that stat. Most new products fail. It's really hard to come out with a new product that's going to sell really well. So what we do is plant a lot of seeds because the only way to find out if something is going to sell is to put a real product at a real price in front of a real customer. So let me share some examples of how we've put these principles into practice. When we were looking at this category of beginner scooters, everything on the market looked like the scooters on the right. 1 wheel in front, 2 wheels in back, and the only difference was if it was a license of Spider-Man or Disney Princess. And we thought, well, if we're going to get in this category, our first thought was we're probably going to have to sign a license with somebody like Disney to do these character scooters. But then our design team started watching kids play with scooters and ride them, and they saw a problem. That rear wheel was right in the way of where the kid wanted to kick the scooter. And so they weren't that functional, they weren't that ergonomic, and they weren't that fun to ride. So our design team put together a bunch of different prototypes, got kids riding them, observing them, and realized that if we just switched it up by putting 2 wheels in front and 1 wheel in back, we could clear that kick path, create a very stable scooter that was perfect for beginning riders. We went from selling just a few thousand scooters a year to selling 500,000. Another thing that we observed was consumers taking our products and adding umbrellas and sun protection to them on their own, either taking an umbrella stroller or something like that. We had never put sun protection on a wagon. No one had. We didn't think that was what we did. And so we said, well, if consumers are doing it, it's probably a good idea. Let's design our own. And so through an iterative process, our design team created a really simple, really convenient way that all of our canopy poles retract into the wagon body, the canopy folds up and goes in the back. And that's a patented canopy system that nobody else can do. Another example is when we were looking at this category that we call foot to floor. Those are the little cars that kids will sit on and just push along with their feet for real young kids. And again, everything on the market was a licensed character. And they were cute, they were fun, nothing really wrong with them. But when we looked at them, they all had these buttons with lots of lights and sound. So there was this big interactive component that almost half the time the child was actually just sitting and playing with it and pushing buttons versus riding it. But we didn't want to sign a license. We said, what can we do that's different and better than the competition? What can we own that's our own brand instead of building somebody else's brand? And our team had also observed this other trend of families making these do-it-yourself busy boards that you can see some pictures here on the screen. And these were all physical, very tactile things that people would make and then post on Etsy and places like that. That's another place that our team will look for trends and what families are doing. So our team said, well, what if we mashed those two things up? What if we took the busy board, put it on this little car, and there was no electronics, there's no license, but tons of great little tactile features because some families maybe are sick of the 20 electronic things that are in their house. And it worked, and it got us into this category of foot-to-floor items, and then we grew from there. Another example was when we were looking at electric cars for kids. Everything on the market looked like these, and they're really cool. They look like real vehicles, like a Ford F-150 truck. That's a really cool item and really fun. But as we dug into it, we saw that there were some problems. There were problems for us, which of course consumers don't care about our problems, but there were problems for us, and we saw some problems with when kids were playing with them. So starting with the kids, they love the role play, they love that they're riding a real car, but they're kind of slow, And the age limit is the age range is very limited. So because of the speed and the size constraints of these big vehicles, they're big, but they're small when you sit inside of them, kids would age out of them pretty quickly. Problems for us are it's really expensive to tool up one of these vehicles. It's like $1 million to tool up one at least. And you have to pay a licensing fee to a company like Ford. And it's in a huge box. If you've ever bought one of these things, the box is enormous, which means higher shipping costs, burning more carbon. And so we looked at those constraints and those challenges, and we said, what can we do that's different and better that we can own with our brand? And so our team started to focus on the ride. Just what is the ride experience for the kid? How can we make that as fun and exciting and thrilling as possible and still be safe? And so we started to look at the fact that we mocked up these different products in our prototype shop, and we saw that the one that kids gravitated to the most was this very low center of gravity car that could go faster with big plastic wheels where they could drift, they could spin out, so they could go fast and spin out. And even if we had all those other vehicles from the competitors and everything, the kids kept going back to this vehicle that we had created. And the rough ones looked kind of like this go-kart. So we thought, well, what if we can just do a real simple go-kart where we can strip away all that big plastic so we don't have to do the tooling. And the only go-karts on the market were really like the gas go-karts that people would have on a farm or more of a rural area. So let's do an electric one that's a lower speed but still faster than the competition, and it became a bestseller. In fact, we won a Toady Award, and if you haven't heard of that, it's like the Oscars for the toy industry. It's called the Toy of the Year Award. So we don't always get them right, though. That's why you have to plant a lot of seeds, because we thought the e-wagon was going to be a huge seller, because we thought when people are pulling a wagon, it can get pretty heavy. Wouldn't it be nice to have a battery and a motor to give a little boost? Didn't sell. We thought the DJ Dance and Spin car was going to be amazing, because in hindsight, it always seems obvious, the ones that aren't going to be successful, okay? So the DJ Dance and Spin, because kids love to dance, they love music, and this car actually had dance moves that you could do. It didn't sell. And we thought that My First Race car was going to fly off the shelf at Walmart because it was really competitively priced, designed for high volume. It didn't sell. Why didn't these products sell? It's really hard to figure that out. It's as hard to figure out why something didn't sell as why something does sell. Sometimes it feels like lightning in the bottle. Was the price too high? Did a competitor come out with a different product? Did the design not connect with a consumer? It's really hard to know. We dig in, we try to learn, we do autopsies afterwards to try to figure it out, but it's hard to figure out. That's why we have to plant a lot of seeds. The most recent seed we planted is a retail store that we just opened up in November at Woodfield Mall outside of Chicago. And our goal in this store is to create a space where families can come in and touch and feel and experience all of our products. And so far, we have gotten a phenomenal reaction from families. It's been awesome. It's doing everything we wanted to do with the brand. And we have to see if we're going to be able to generate enough sales to support the store. So I'll tell you in about a year if this seed that we've just planted is successful or not. So by following these three principles and others, we have been able to put the company on a path from failing to phenomenal. And we've come out with lots of products that have fueled our growth. So now we have over 150 products sold all over the world. Last year, we were named by Fast Company as one of the 10 most innovative companies in North America, and our team is so proud of this because we've built this really creative and committed team that's coming out with all of these great products. And the results are that we've grown a lot since that day in 1992 that I walked into my dad's office. So, dig deep to find your purpose. Watch your customers like a hawk to see what they do so that you can solve problems that result in great selling products. And plant a lot of seeds, but don't bet the farm on any one seed. so you can see what will grow and make it phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you.